Now let's take it to the next level and build a story from our data. For our level 3 chart, we need to think about the chart as a data story. So rather than presenting the values as they are, we want to start by telling a statement and then giving some supporting evidence. So this is again where, depending on your business needs and your current situation, what you need to say and how you will present it will all change. So here is one example of level 3 story, and I'm gonna build this. But as you watch the progress and as you take notes, constantly think back about which of these ideas you can use or change for your business situations. So we want to start with a statement that tells for the selected country what is the overall sales and how much is that as a percentage of all country sales. So New Zealand 218,000 is 18% of all country sales. And then for each of the 3 groups of salespeople, top 3, bottom 3, and the middle one, we want to add some additional information. So for example, here within New Zealand, top 3 salespeople bring in a total of $96,000 and contribute 44% of sales. So how do we generate these kind of narrative statements and keep everything dynamic, so when I switch to another country like India or Canada, we'll see the narrative for them. To start off, we need to set up an area within our workbook for doing some of the calculations. Most of the numbers are already there, but not everything is there. So for example, we can calculate total sales of selected country, and this is equal to sum of all these 10 values. But we also need to know what is this as against all the values. So here we could use a couple of different approaches. So you can go back to the original data and calculate the total amount. Alternatively, you can make one more pivot. I'm just going to calculate against the original data. So all sales is equal to sum of the amount column here. I have not named my table, so it's simply called table 1 amount, but you can name this as sales or data and then that'll work. So we have 2 values, and I can now generate a statement that will be what is this as a percentage of that. But we also need to know which country is selected. Currently, the only way for us to know which country is selected is looking at the slicer and the highlighted value. So right now India is highlighted. We can use the highlighted thing to see Canada is highlighted. But how do I extract that as a value on the spreadsheet? This is where we can use a special technique called a harvester pivot. A harvester pivot is a simple pivot table whose purpose is to tell us what is picked on the slicer. To make one, you just select one of the other pivot tables that is already talking to the slicer. So in this case, this pivot table, Control C, and then go to a blank space on the screen. So I'm going to go here, Control V. So we'll make a copy of this pivot table. When you copy a pivot table like this, because the slicer is already linked to this pivot, it will also be linked here. Notice what happens when I switch to Australia. Both of them show me Australia values. So from here, within this pivot table, we'll go to the pivot table fields. We don't need to see the salesperson. Instead, we want to see the geography. So when you put geography here, then it will list the selected country. So in this case, Australia. But if you go here and pick India, then this cell will say India. While you're here, I'm just going to go to the design and then turn off any grand totals and subtotals. So we'll only see the selected country. Through this harvester pivot, I can see now which country is selected. So N6, the cell will tell me the correct selected country. You might be thinking, what if the user picks multiple countries? Within the slicer, you can click and drag to select multiple countries and they will all show up. In this case, not only N6 will give me the value, but all these other cells will also have the values. We'll work under the assumption that at any time only one country will be selected. But if you have a scenario where multiple items can be picked, then you will have to think about how to handle that within your story. So once we have the selected country, we'll print that here. Selected country, and this is equal to my N6. So I have all the values. We can calculate the proportion, and this is equal to this divided by that. And when you apply percentage formatting, you'll see that it is 14%. So now we can make a chart title. The chart title would be Australia. Australia's sales are $168,679 and 14% of total sales. So we'll make a sentence along those lines. So we'll say Australia brings in ampersand this and contributes ampersand 14% of sales. So we want to say Australia brings in 168,679 and contributes 13% of sales. But what we instead see is that instead of 14%, we see 0.1359361. This is because technically the value of this cell is 0.1359. So we need a way to convert this into a percentage format. We can use the text formula to do that. Text of that value in 0% format, which will basically take that and convert that into a text of 14%. Likewise here, we will use a text formula, text of this $###. So that will take this and convert this into dollar format. Once that is done, I'm just going to arrange my references. You can use mouse pointer to move things like this, and that'll give you the chart title. So our chart title is ready. Our graph is kind of ready. We can reuse the same graph. So we will make a copy of this, name this as level 3, and we want this title to be the title that is generated here. So we'll go to the level 3, select the chart title, click on the chart title, and then click on the formula bar, say equal to, go here and point to the title that we have generated. So this is how you can link up the chart title to a specific cell in your workbook. So whatever that cell says, that's what the chart title will be. Hit enter, and now you have your chart title set up to that. So Australia brings in 168,679 and contributes 14% of sales. That's beautiful, and our chart title is done. Let's quickly test this title. So if I change to Canada, New Zealand, or UK, it works beautifully. The next thing that we want to do is we want to generate some sentences around top 3 and bottom 3 performers. So I'll just show you the pieces for top 3 and bottom 3, and the rest of it you can figure it out. So top 3 contribution, this is nothing but sum of these 3 values. Bottom 3 would be sum of these 3 values. And then we can calculate these as a percentage. So 93,000 divided by total Australia sales, or whatever that country is, and 19,000 as against that. So we will get to the percentage values, and then we will convert the text representation. So text of this value in the $###. And then when you drag this down, we'll get the same for that. Likewise, text of this as 0%, and for the next one also. So these are the values that we will be using in our narrative part. So top 3 sentence is top 3 people in the selected country bring in 54% of sales. So that's what we will say. Top 3 people in that country bring in 54% of sales. So top 3 people in UK bring 54% of sales. Likewise, bottom 3 sentence is also generated. So we now have both sentences, and we need to load these up on the chart. We have a chart title, so we're able to link it up. But how do we add some additional boxes to the chart that tell the rest of the sentences? This is very simple. You want to select the chart, and then once the chart is selected, go to Insert, and then from Shapes, click on the text box and add a text box. So this first text box is for top 3. So we'll select the text box, go to formula bar, say equal to, and then point to the top 3 sentence. Likewise, we will insert one more text box. So shapes, text box, and then add the text box like this. This is equal to this one. So we now have 2 text boxes, but they are dynamic text. So whatever is my country, the text box will say that. I'm just going to move these things around until they are in the perfect position. And if needed, you can also fill up some color on the text box, background color, so that they're easy to read. So for example, I want to align this color with my top 3 colors. So I'm just going to change this to that, and text color will be in white. So there are those 2 sentences. You can add one more sentence. You can even bring in some additional points on the top, and everything will work nicely. And you can now change this to see updated sentences, updated narrative. Everything works beautifully. So there is our level 3 chart. There are some subtle differences between this particular one that I showed up front and the one that we now created. The main difference is, of course, there is an additional sentence here which uses another type of logic, and then the slicer is kind of blended into the chart. Whereas here, the slicer actually, we can make it out. So to do this, I have used a special slicer style. So if I go to the slicer, this is the style that we were using, but I have set up a custom style to apply my formatting. You can create a new slicer style from here and then change the way the background, the border, highlighting, everything works. I leave that for your imagination.